No, seriously. What if everything you've been told about billionaires, the hustle, the genius, the self-made story, is just a story? Don't answer that yet, because there's something the world's wealthiest people figured out decades ago. Something so simple, so hidden in plain sight, that once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. And here's what's wild. It's completely legal. Let's set the scene. It's 2024. The top 1% of Americans hold more wealth than the entire bottom 90% combined. That's not a political opinion. That's a Federal Reserve data point. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Larry Ellison. These men didn't just get rich. They crossed a threshold that most economists can barely explain. A level of wealth so extreme that the normal rules of money simply stop applying. But why? How does a human being accumulate more money than they could spend in 1,000 lifetimes? Here's the part they don't teach in school. Most of us think wealth is about income. You work, you earn, you save, maybe you invest. That's the script we were handed. But what if everything we've been told about how wealth is actually built is wrong? Here's the first crack in the story. Elon Musk's reported salary at Tesla for years? Zero. Not a typo. He took no salary. Yet his net worth exploded by hundreds of billions. So where does the money come from if not a paycheck? The answer is something called unrealized gains. You own stock. The stock goes up. On paper, you're richer, but you haven't sold anything. You haven't touched it. So technically, you haven't earned a single taxable dollar. Now here's where it gets interesting. Banks will give you a loan against that stock as collateral. You take the cash. You live on it. You never sell the shares. You never trigger a tax event. And the loan? Almost free. Interest rates near zero for people at this level. This strategy has a name. It's called buy, borrow, die. And it's completely, totally, 100% legal. But here's where it gets disturbing. This isn't new. The Vanderbilts did it. The Rockefellers did it. The Morgans. These systems, the offshore trusts, the stepped-up basis loopholes, the shell companies, the donor-advised funds, they've been quietly engineered over generations. ProPublica obtained leaked IRS data in 2021. What they found stunned even veteran tax attorneys. Jeff Bezos, in one 2-year stretch, paid zero in federal income tax. Zero. While his wealth grew by $99 billion. Not illegal, not even unusual at that level. The system isn't broken. The question is, was it ever built for you? Now think about this. In 1900, people thought it was impossible for a private individual to be worth more than a small country. John D. Rockefeller shattered that idea. Adjusted for inflation, his peak net worth was somewhere around $430 billion. They called it impossible. Then they called it a fluke. Then 5 others did the same thing. What if we're watching the same shift happen again, but faster and quieter? Because right now, something is happening at the top of the wealth pyramid that most economists admit they don't fully understand. The growth curves are no longer linear. They're exponential. And they keep accelerating even through crashes, recessions, pandemics. The 2020 pandemic cost tens of millions of Americans their jobs. U.S. billionaire wealth grew by $1.3 trillion in the first 6 months alone. How does that happen? There's a theory, and it's gaining traction in some of the most serious economic circles, that extreme wealth past a certain threshold becomes self-reinforcing. It's not just compound interest, It's something almost biological. Once capital reaches scale, it begins to shape the environment around it. Tax codes, regulations, political access, media narratives. The infrastructure of society itself starts bending toward it, not because of conspiracy, but because of gravity. Money at the highest levels doesn't just earn returns. It rewrites the rules under which all other money operates. But here's the part nobody's talking about. What happens when the next generation inherits this? Not just the money, but the access, the structures, the loopholes passed down in family trusts so sophisticated that most accountants have never seen one in person. The Forbes 400 list, the richest Americans, a growing portion of them didn't build fortunes. They inherited systems for protecting them. Economists call it dynastic wealth. Historians have seen it before. Pre-revolutionary France, the gilded aristocracies of Renaissance Europe. Societies where the gap between the top and everyone else became so structurally permanent that it stopped feeling like inequality and started feeling like nature. And here's the real question, the one that keeps some researchers up at night. We've had progressive income taxes for over a century specifically to prevent this kind of wealth consolidation. Estate taxes, capital gains taxes. The entire architecture was designed as a pressure valve. But what if the machine has already evolved past the controls designed to contain it? Because right now, there are legal structures, grantor-retained annuity trusts, dynasty trusts in states with no rule against perpetuities, charitable remainder trusts that shelter billions while technically giving, that allow fortunes to move across generations almost intact. Families, decades, compounding. At what point does an inherited economic structure stop being wealth and start being something closer to a permanent class? The skeptic in you is probably pushing back right now, and that's fair. These people created real companies, real jobs, real technology. Amazon is convenient. Tesla moved an entire industry. The case for billionaires as engines of innovation isn't nothing. But here's what that argument doesn't answer. Why does the innovation require that specific level of personal wealth concentration? Why $200 billion and not $200 million? No one has answered that cleanly. Not economists, not the billionaires themselves. And some of them, the ones who've been inside the machine longest, have started to say so out loud. Warren Buffett publicly admitted he pays a lower effective tax rate than his secretary. Abigail Disney called the system obscene. A group of ultra-wealthy individuals literally lobbied to be taxed more. When the people inside the machine start questioning the machine, what does that tell you about what's really happening inside it? Here's where we leave you. We're living through the largest wealth concentration in American history, possibly in the history of any democracy. The systems are real, the math is real, the legal structures are documented and publicly available, if you know where to look. But there's one thing nobody can model, nobody can predict. What happens to a society when the people at the top accumulate so much that the concept of more loses all meaning, but the system that produces it keeps running anyway? Not because anyone chose it, not because anyone planned it, but because no one ever figured out how to turn it off. Is this a system that can be fixed, or has it already gone too far? Drop your answer below. And I want to know, if you could access even one of these legal strategies, would you use it?